Hey everyone, I'm Andy Shipsides. I run all the outreach and education programs here at AbelCine. I have a great group of panelists here today. Talk about documentary today, how they use these Canon tools, and just really what they've been up to. So I want to just go down a list. I have a group of now 6 people. I love that, and we'll just go down a list, sort of alphabetical order, so to speak. But so start with Kief Davidson. Hey Kief, how's it going? Hey, you have a mic there too. You don't have to use it just yet, but just so you know. So Kief is a Oscar-nominated director. His films include one's coming out pretty soon. It's called Beyond the Brick, the Lego documentary, right? The Lego documentary. So I think it's got picked up by TWC, Weinstein Company. Very, very excited there. 2013 Academy Award nominee for HBO release Open Heart Films. We'll see a clip of that in a minute. AFI Film Festival and IDFA winner for Kissimmee the Dream. And a DGA nominee and Tribeca a winner for The Devil's Minor. So he's got a lot of accolades, and we're going to see what he's been up to lately. Senain Kheshgi is also a IDA panelist. To get it right, Kheshgi. I did it wrong. I know. We just talked about this too. I even corrected it in there. Senain. You're messing with me. Senain is a Pakistani-American filmmaker who has produced, written, and directed projects from numerous television networks, AMC, ABC, Are we just a little... and CNN. Her first feature documentary, the feature film, The First Year, directed by David Gutenberg, was awarded the prestigious George Foster Peabody Award. Senain directed, produced, and wrote with Gita Patel, Project Kashmir, a feature documentary which premiered at IDFA and the Human Rights Watch International Film Festival. She co-produced Morgan Spurlock's AMC pilot Committed and served as production coordinator on the film Comic-Con episode 4, A Fan's Hope. I saw that one. Really good. Yeah, I loved it. You all worked on that one. See, I love that one. And we have a lot of Comic-Con fans in the area. I know we do. I don't know why I know that. I just guessed, wild guess here. Just jumping right ahead. Where was I? Sorry, I just produced, co-wrote, and directed 2 short films in Pakistan with James Longley, Iraq and Fragments, and I missed one before. She also co-produced on Academy Award winner Ross Kaufman's. Who also worked on Born in Brothels, Wait for Me. So lots of stuff there. I want to move on for this. I'm sorry. Move on. Okay. She's really busy. She does a lot of cool stuff. And I'm talking really fast, so I want to go around. I'm just going to keep talking until people start gathering. Now we have the crowd, so we should, Here's Shana Hagen. Shana's a great, Shana's a great Able client, a long-term Able client, and a great friend. She's worked on and photographed several Oscar and Emmy award-winning documentaries and narrative feature films. She has countless of hours of nonfiction and reality-based TV work. Her work includes Oscar-winning I can't talk apparently, guys. Breathing lessons, and 11 Sundance Film Festival selections, including Queen of Versailles, a personal favorite. I love that one. Shakespeare Behind Bars and After Innocence. Shana was chosen as director of photography at the prestigious Sundance Filmmakers Lab and has been nominated for an Emmy for her work on Survivor China. Shana filmed the pilot and 4 seasons of NBC's hit comedy Parks and Rec. Was the second unit DP on Netflix Arrested Development. Am I just dinging all over? And sorry, I lost it. And shot 4 seasons of Survivor and 3 of The Apprentice. Basically, you're really busy, aren't you? You're just always shooting and... I'm just going to do that. Maybe that'll help a little bit. That could do something. Maybe not. That's even worse now. It's like...
What is the feedback? We're just getting...
You're getting a lot of people, yeah. Sorry about that, guys. She's also involved in numerous ongoing documentaries, including Lauren Greenfield's new untitled feature doc, shooting in the Philippines, a project directed by Morgan Neville about Yo-Yo Ma called The Silk Road Project, and Clive Davis documentary in developing about 81-year-old music mogul. She is also collaborating again with director Michael Apt on the 3rd installment of his Married in America series. It's a long bio, but it's well worth it. Tons of great stuff. I liked it all. She's like, okay, good, move on. Okay, good. You're killing me. You're killing me here.
Sandy, right?
Sandy Chandler, a long-term client, great friend. Sandy Chandler graduated MFA of the USC School of Cinema. She has worked in a range of formats and industries, 35, Betacam, etc. Sandra focuses on her career towards nonfiction, and she bought an Aton XTR from us many years ago, and she's in the Aton Club, which is, that small, she knows as well. She's nominated twice for an Emmy for documentary cinematography, Living Dolls, and All Aboard, Rosie's Family Cruise, both for HBO. Her recent work was using the Canon C300 and has been featured in documentaries Code Black and Women Makers. Last but not least, we have two great young documentarians. Documentarian just sounds like one of those words, but
filmmakers.
Filmmakers. Let's just go with that. Filmmakers, both from UCLA, and these two guys won the Canon grant, which is a Canon grant award that we had here at AbelCine last year, and they won. So they have access to cameras for months and months and months, which is great, and they're always in here. So Stephen Liang and David Kirkeby, and they're here to talk about what they're up to as well. So lots of people. I should have pared down the bios a little bit, maybe. I don't know. Looking back, let's get into this panel. How about that? That was the first 45 minutes of the presentation. So, but well worth it for the whole group, So okay, having known all that, lots of great filmmakers. Thank you, Kief, Senain, Stephen. I wanted to start with you guys and talk a little bit about the business today of documentary work. I kind of wanted to look at it from sort of broad perspective downward. I've been really intrigued and interested lately in just the number of documentaries that I'm watching, and I don't necessarily go out and find them. Like I love watching documentaries, but I just find myself watching them more and more. And I don't know if that's just me as a person, or is it about access. So my question to you is, are we seeing with the new distribution channels, maybe just more TV channels, but also the internet and other sources, are you seeing an increase in this kind of work? You're all working in this field, but do you think that this is happening more often? And how is that? And how has that impacted you guys? So we'll start with David, I guess. Steve. My brain is. I'm done.
so many bios.
Yeah. Yes.
Hello. I'm sure you all agree this is probably the best time ever for our medium. I remember having a conversation I think it was with you, but talking about how years ago it was always like, well, what's your day job? After you'd say you make documentaries.
Yeah.
Now it seems like you could actually make a living doing it.
Yeah.
There are a lot more outlets for it. It's more outlets for distribution, more outlets for just alternative ways of making films. Short film content seems to be, how a lot of us are now starting to supplement our feature work, whether it's short films for the web, commercial-based documentaries. It seems like there's a lot more opportunity now more than ever before.
Yeah, I think not only do we have this great, access with Netflix and Hulu and all these things that people can see documentaries, they're being pushed at us in a way that is rising above the fray of the noise. A lot of people don't necessarily think of going to the cinema to see a documentary, unfortunately, because I think it's the best way to see the movies.
Of course, yeah.
But if you're home and you're looking for something smart, I think people are turning away from news. What traditional television news was, because they're looking for authenticity. They're looking for realness that they're not getting elsewhere. So that's really helping the business and our medium a lot.
And the news is turning to films. Look at CNN Films.
Yeah. Exactly.
The news channel that's now
they're
releasing
turning to documentary filmmakers to make those
the
projects.
content.
Yeah.
It's really. Again, I don't think it's just me. I think it's so many people are accessing this content in all kind of new ways. But you're right. I think they're all looking for alternative, smart news making. And I think companies like HBO, Netflix, and others are pushing that. But I think it's also just the internet that's driving. Would you agree in general? This. Do you think the access? Well, I guess Netflix is the internet in a sense. But is that the reason, or is it something? Is that part of the drive? Or what do you think?
No.
Do you have to hit this button or? Testing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. I think Netflix is just one part of the equation. The other part of it, there are other online distribution platforms that are growing. Vimeo has a growing, they're distributing their own content. I think Hulu has always been there. I think there's just a bigger demand for short form documentary storytelling as well. I got to see the documentarian Lucy Walker at a Sundance panel, and she said that shorts are the new long. And I really believe that. I feel like, as an audience, especially my generation, the millennials, we just don't really have the attention span to sit through maybe a longer piece documentary. So I think there's so many ways that as filmmakers we're able to tell a really powerful story in short form, and also to do it in a way that is cinematic as well. It's compelling.
No, I 100% agree. Well, I just think it's a very interesting time for all of us. So I guess, just to, touch on the, and I'm sorry if we're feeding back too much here, touch on the, technology front of it, and something we talked about a lot ahead of this, Senain, was, about the tools that we have available now, from the smallest little tools, camera tools, to the, to the ones that so many of us use. That we sell here, I guess you could say, but access to the cameras themselves. I mean, are they enabling? I mean, from your iPhone, to Canon C300, C500. I mean, is that something you're seeing as well? You're seeing more content being produced by more people. I mean, is that part of the equation?
I mean, for me, I think cameras are a tool.
Right.
They're not going to make a great movie for you. First of all, it should always be story leads. And if it's story leads, then you have to look at what kind of camera works for your story. It's not always, you want the biggest with all the bells and whistles. Maybe, I don't know if you guys were in the paranormal activity panel earlier, but you're looking at different cameras to do different things for you. But ultimately, you're the storyteller. So if you're the storyteller, what do you need to tell your story? Sometimes you might need something that's super small. Like for myself, when I shoot in places that are war zones, I don't need a camera that looks like a gun, because they do. I mean, and especially when there are drones flying over, they don't ask questions. So for me, it's all about, a small, maybe a 5D when that was, sort of all the rage. But then when you start building the kit out, it just doesn't work for the intimacy. So it's always about the story and where you are.
In one hand, it's working, yeah?
Yeah, it's working.
In one hand, you're right. I mean, there is more access to the gear, so there's more people now making films that normally wouldn't. So people that do have a story are telling those stories, and that's feeding this. I think access to all these distribution channels are great, but as Senain said, it is about story and finding great stories, and more are being told now because people have access to it.
No, it's a great point. And so starting there and going a little further into it, since on the story front and on the telling of the story front, when you are going into a new production, you said choosing the right tool for the job, let's say, right? How much does this stuff play into the how much does the story play into the camera choice, as you could say? I mean, as you said, if it looks like a gun, you can't bring it in, So if we're looking at cameras, Canon or otherwise, I mean, are you making that choice? And then I'll take that question to you two, and then and from the cinematography perspective, how do you choose a camera? Is it based on the strictly on the look, or is it based on other factors? So I'll start with that. So how much, when you pick up a project, Kief, when you start a project, how do you decide from a director standpoint what tool to use?
Well, let's story first.
Yeah.
I'm doing a film right now in Africa where we're following these former Israeli Mossad agents and undercover Chinese trying to bust the ivory trade. I'm not going to go in with a big camera. Actually, a lot of that's being shot with hidden cameras and GoPros and spy camera technology. So really, every job is completely different. So I always start from how will the camera serve this particular job. I tend to shoot C300 a lot mainly because I like the look of it, but I also like that it's a small body,
Yeah.
and I could be in an intimate situation with my subjects. But it's really job to job, and I don't think one needs to have loyalty to a certain brand, you know. But it just so happens to be that for myself, I've used the C300 probably more than any other camera as of late, partially because of the form factor of it.
Fair enough.
I guess there was a point that I was going to make about that, in that, while you're looking at cameras to tell your story, you're also trying to figure out where you're going to be in 3 years. Because sometimes when you're making a film and you have a small budget, you're not looking at $1 million or more, to make a documentary. It's either you buy one camera and you try to hold on to it and try to finish your film, and sometimes these films take 2 to 4 years to make. So you're looking at this as a personal investment, so that the budget is always dictates the camera as well.
Yeah, well, of course. That's the reality, isn't it? Right? Yeah, pay it off.
And let's face it, sometimes if you have a free camera, that could overrule other cameras.
That's true. I got you. Sorry.
But these ladies have, now that the cameras are shifting in price and quality, and I mean, I think they would have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, well, so that's so to you, the cinematographers, the DPs, David too. I mean, when you go choose a tool, I mean, maybe it's a tool that you're investing in, or maybe it's a tool that you're just renting for the job. How do you decide that? Is it the look? Is it the size? What are the factors that go into that and play on that decision? So,
well, for the longest time, there wasn't a lot of choice. It's really recently that there's so much choice. It was 16 millimeter, Aton. There's no choice there. Maybe an NSR, but for handheld work, for verite work, it was an Aton, and then it was a Betacam. And then ENG broadcast 2/3 inch cameras, which are still very viable in certain situations. And now, for me, I made the jump straight to the C300 because I can work with that like I worked with a shoulder-mounted camera. It's the first one that came out that I could rig up to be able to do the kind of work I do, shooting a situation in the moment that gave me the ability to do the dance, right? Instead of just being stuck looking at a monitor. But always, if the filmmaker owns a camera, that's the camera we're going to use. And a lot of times that was the 5D. And that allowed people to use high quality lenses very inexpensively, but it's not really was a camera I could ever use to do the kind of work I like to do in the situations that I do. So now for me now it's just kind of the 35 millimeter format that I can build out in a way I can put on my shoulder. But the other thing is I might have 3 or 4 cameras, even if I'm a single person, because you've got the 5D, which is great for mounting on a windshield, doing POV stuff. You can get it into small places. Everybody's got a couple of GoPros. That spy cam, sort of voyeuristic look is very fashionable right now. So now it's sort of like a lot of maybe 3 different options on one job is what I'm finding.
Yeah. For me, it has a lot to do with certainly with budget, but sometimes I work backwards. I start to think about, where is this going to be shown? Is this a web piece? Is it a theatrical documentary? Is it for television? Is it, so I kind of work backwards, and then I figure out, okay, well, if we're doing a theatrical film, maybe the 5D is not so great, or maybe a C300 even is, or I'm currently doing a project that's 4K for the Annenberg. Where it's required 4K capture. So that right away is like, all right, we have X, Y, and Z as an option. And it's a handheld show. It's a documentary. We didn't want to shoot RAW. We're shooting with the F55 with Cabrio glass, which I really like. So that's kind of on the high end. I'm also really would love to use the Amira as an option, but realistically, in a documentary budget, it's not quite. I think supply and demand right now is so
scarce, that the prices are really high. So documentaries realistically aren't going to be able to afford that. But so sometimes I do work backwards and sort of in terms of resolution. Another big thing is obviously budget and logistics about if we're traveling, how do you, I'm traveling to Russia tomorrow with this F55 package. Our second camera is a Canon 1DC that shoots 4K, and we're doing, they don't cut together too well, but at least that's our option. That's what we can carry, and that's what the budget allows in terms of excess bags and all that stuff. But I'm in agreement with, with Sandra in terms of the C300 is kind of a workhorse. I own a C300 EF. But often, if I have the choice, I actually do take. Sometimes the last couple films I've done with Lauren Greenfield, we actually have two C300s. I have a PL with the PL glass, a 19 to 90, and often the 85 to 300 Cabrio, which I love as a pairing, and then an EF body with the EF lensing. So I have kind of the best of both worlds. I have a shoulder-mounted, adjustable zoom. I mean, the zoom motor on the Cabrios works very similarly to like our old. The 8 to 64, the zoom range is great and holds, the focus holds with the zoom range or the focal length moves. But the EF is great because if you're in a car or, if you're in small spaces, it's just the best of both worlds. Often you don't have that luxury, but that's sort of the way I've been working lately is if you can take two bodies, then you get the best of both worlds. But, it totally depends on what your subject is, the budget. It's all of those factors really play into choosing the right camera. And I like, what you were mentioning before about, sometimes documentaries take 5 years. So you kind of have to think ahead as well. Like, what
it's going to be viable.
Yeah,
exactly. It's going to last 5 years today.
And
that's the crazy thing. You don't, how do you even decide now, right?
Yeah, and bottom line is there's no right. There's no right answer. It's like whatever was working for you, for your budget, for your story, for your subject, and what's free, what's available, whatever. But I think the key is, at least for us and what we do, is just get the story made. Yeah. It doesn't really. It matters what you use, but if you're kind of trying to decide which camera, whatever, just go and make your story. Just do it, and that's the key. Content is king. Regardless of what format you have, it's just if you get the story, get it in a way that, is not just, distracting, make sure you're in focus and exposed, whatever, but just content is king. Don't worry about the minutia of which format is right or whatever, just do it,
Yeah, I find myself less and less even thinking about camera.
Yeah.
Fair
enough.
It's thinking about what glass I'm using.
Yeah.
I don't see myself testing 10 different cameras and obsessing over that. It's having a crate of lenses and figuring out what's the right look for this. And if I'm using a certain camera, do I want softer glass and older glass to offset the sharpness of these new cameras that look ultra sharp?
It's becoming very common now that the glass becomes sort of your artistry, the tool that makes it. So. Very much. You see that across the line. You saw a GE commercial. We could show that in a little bit on Canon glass just recently. Right? Yeah. So that choice, lens choice is. I 100% agree.
For me, the most important thing is finding a camera that can adapt to the situation you're in. For Stephen and I, we've been shooting our doc on the 300, and Stephen wanted to use the L Canon still lenses just because it is small and it allows us to keep a low profile. But for the last project I did, I shot it on the C500 with an Odyssey and with Super Baltars, and so it was a much bigger thing. And that camera is great because you can really choose the workflow that is best for your project, whether it's ProRes or whether you actually have the space and time to record in DPX. It's very important just to have a camera that can adapt to your situation. You can take the recorder off and all of a sudden it becomes a 300 and you're now shooting with that low profile again. And
it's great. Thank you. So maybe we'll shift gears, focus a little bit. Kief, you brought a great with the trailer for Open Heart, which is a C300 shot. You were one of the first, maybe the first AbelCine client to get one, I guess. I don't know how many. You were early on.
Actually, we shot that film. It was in February, and the C300 wasn't available yet. And somehow I talked AbelCine to giving me their first model that came in.
And it worked okay?
It worked, but I trashed it in Sudan. Destroyed it. So went on to a second C300 after that.
So it held up. But it's become definitely the workhorse, as you all said, in this world. So we'll watch the trailer for that now.
Sure.
And so have some music. The levels come from this side. So I will. Very good. This is a great doc.
So, this film is a good example of why I chose a specific camera and the lenses I chose. I was stressing out literally 4 days before the shoot because we were planning on shooting with a competitor. I guess I won't even mention it. But it was a bigger camera.
Yeah.
And my fear was, I needed something really small because I'm dealing with kids. I don't want this big, huge lens, and I don't want a huge camera. But there was a few shots there where you could see these girls coming off like in a van in the middle of the night, and I knew that we were going to be filming that in the middle of the night. I needed something that would work great in low light. So that was the reason why I wanted the C300. But for the look of it, once we ultimately did get that C300 from you guys, it then came to, well, how are we going to shoot this with lenses? And it was a real combination of using the L series glass, but I also used a lot of primes. I shot primes as much as I could. And I shot primes partially just, A, for the lower light situations, and B, I kind of wanted to challenge myself to work with primes instead of a zoom lens and move my body as opposed to always relying on a zoom. And it did give me a much smaller footprint again. I mean, a C300 with a tiny little prime lens is, as close to, it's a small camera.
Yeah, no, it's true, and it goes back to your point before, that sometimes you just can't have it be this big thing, it has to be a small thing. So I guess I want to take this, and there we go, take this time to talk about, our, the challenges. I mean, the challenges of shooting the way you guys all shoot, both from a director, producer standpoint, and making documentary itself. And every time I've tried to do it, I've been in this world. It's interesting. So I just wanted if you had shared stories about Open Heart and other stories you worked on. Some of the big challenges, maybe even beyond the technology. I mean, this is a big, broad question here, but if you could share an anecdote about some of the struggles that you have every day and how you've had to overcome them. Low light being one thing you fixed, it's a problem you solved. But maybe there's just some anecdotal discussion here about this process and how you could and how you could use some of these tools to help you get over that. I mean, it's kind of a general weird question, but I'd love to hear just some stories from your perspective about the troubles that you have every day doing what you do, and whatever you got, basically. Because this is the stuff we all love to hear.
Well, I mean, just to follow up on this, I mean, this,
an open heart.
I'd say, the technical aspect of it was the least challenging part of it.
Yeah.
I think probably the most significant challenge for me going into it was knowing that there's a fairly good shot that one of these kids are going to die.
Yeah.
And what kind of crew do I bring that could deal with that?
Right.
Was like the first sort of big thing. And there's a couple of, crew people that I normally use that I chose not to use because I thought they would either be A, insensitive to the situation, or B, emotionally not capable to handle the situation. So there was that. And I think, it's always a challenge when you're dealing with subject matter that's very sensitive like that. You want to be respectful. And I do feel that in these types of situations, having a small camera, having a small footprint, and even throwing the crew out of the room as much as you can, even though I had a DP on that set, I shoot. And I threw the entire crew out a good amount of time when I was working with the kids, so it was just me.
Yeah, you be close, intimate, and you're operating right there.
That's the thing. That's story. That's
it
trust, and that's, it's respect, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, in this case, you have kids that are very sick.
Right.
The last thing they want to see is like
it's intimacy that you
four white guys staring at them and with a boom bowl.
Yeah, no kidding. Maybe from a cinematography point of view, in that same regard, I mean, in a sense of story, but also in a sense of, what that story brought, what it brought. I mean, this is a great example of that, but in let's say, low light, again, being an example of one need, but also, just the tool at hand, that you have available. I mean, again, I'm picking your brain here. I don't know.
I mean, I'm trying to think of one story, like almost on the opposite end of Kief's explanation about being intimate and small footprint for a number of reasons, for intimacy levels, things like that. On the other end of the scale, I recently did a shoot about a doc that I can't talk too much about, but I'll speak in very vague terms. But it's with a person who sort of demands a lot of attention and is a public figure, and we were following her around, and we kind of talked about this with the filmmakers ahead of time, that we kind of needed to have a little bit larger camera. So We were actually shooting with C300, but we decided to go with the PL lensing because the way that the rig gets built out, it sort of feels like a bigger camera. Yeah. So to kind of appease that, or to fulfill that sort of, kind of an unspoken request from her sort of her press people, hey, she works better when she, I'm giving away way too much.
Was she like, what is this little shit camera?
Right. No, she responded to the sort of larger camera. So the footprint, kind of on the opposite end of the scale, does make an impression.
Yeah, it does.
In certain circumstances. And sometimes it works to your disadvantage. In this case, it worked to our advantage. So, but that's another one too, where we have both the C300 PL, and then sometimes when we're in a taxi or in a van or something, we need to be shooting with a small footprint. I just drop the PL and pick up the EF, and it's a great world. So,
it's a great point. I mean, I found myself wanting to shoot a project with the C300, and I knew the client wanted to see something big, so we wound up shooting Alexa simply because of that. I feel like we could have actually, because of what it was, had the same results for what it was. It was going to the web. It was
Right.
But, no.
So I don't know. That's probably not a great thing to talk about, but it's realistic, and
it's true. It's a challenge. It goes along with it.
Yeah.
Well, more on our topic of you. We had some clips we want to show. We could bring up and discuss. And right now, if you want to play back and talk about, is that?
I wonder if I should do
a little.
Should give Peru or kids boxing. Let's do the kids boxing one. That's actually a little bit lighter than the Peru one.
Yeah, let's lighten up.
After on the. Open Heart's such a fantastically powerful piece. Do mixed martial arts there, MMA.
Oh wow, yeah. I had no idea.
Well, you can get your kids enrolled. It's a school in Florida. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, good to know. I'm from Florida. I'm going there. So I guess when I watch that, first thing is, and I see your face, and someone's watching the screen. I mean, how engaged do you get in these projects when you get into them? Obviously, as a storyteller. But from a cinematographer's point of view, and as a story, you said when you went with the Open Heart, you were worried about the team being that engaged with that. I mean, how draining is it on you to be in these things, and how do you keep your emotions in check when you do these things? How can you be there and not be like, jaw drop,
Right. I love all of what you were saying, that emotional response, I feed off of. I crave, because that's what informs my work. It's like whatever you're interested in, and why are these parents enrolling their kids in this? That's interesting enough to me. But when I'm engaged in a story, I find that sort of, I tap into that emotional response and inform my work. But I think in this instance, we were there for, I think, maybe 4 days, and we had a couple classes, and we did the interviews a couple days and such. But, I try to, approach it with an open mind, certainly. But, that emotional response, I think, definitely is something I crave, and something that engagement is so thrilling and so challenging to be right there in it. I mean, anyway.
Well, I think that's what makes you such a good cinematographer. You're like a director in your own, you direct because you're listening. And when you have a DP who's used to working on scripted stuff, sometimes, they don't think in the same way that documentary cinematographers do. You're looking for someone who's listening all the time, and you need someone who you can look across the room with and say, give them a look, and they know what you're talking about. Like, it's that kind of dance. You're really like the eyes and ears of each other. And to give an example of something that happened to me in an emotional way, I was shooting in Kashmir with Ross Kaufman, who did Born into Brothels and several other really amazing projects. And we were doing an interview with a guy who was a victim of an IED explosion, and he had lost his legs. And so we were doing a very quiet, just me and him interview. And as we're filming, I notice Ross's camera starts to tilt down to the point where it literally he falls over because he passes out listening to the story as we're in the middle of this shoot. So that's how engaged, he becomes. We had to sort of stop and go, "Are you okay?" And he was like, "Yeah, I just was feeling every minute of it as he was going," because we were really breaking down the whole thing. So.
Yeah. I would say it's just hook, line, and sinker. It's like you're saying, it's so sucked in. I'm crying. I'm trying not to make too much noise crying when I'm in this, like maybe 5 inches from somebody's face, and or just, especially in Another World. When I shot Living Dolls, I thought it was going to be a real joke, and like this is a terrible thing. But what I love is having my perspective totally turned around, and within about a day, 2 days, totally lost in the milieu of that world. That world becomes my world. And it's like, that little girl doesn't win. We got to get her those coaches. And she needs that big hairdo, you know. And it's just like, sometimes, you know, you're on a schedule. You've got 6 hours till lunch if you're trying to follow some rules. I might not put the camera down for 6 hours. And the only way I can do that is really when it's something that is driving me, you know. Because if it's on something I don't care about, that I think is stupid, I was like, in about 5 minutes, I'm like, everything's heavy. The camera's heavy. My back hurts. But, you know, when engaged in a story, it's like time just goes by. You just totally got to get the shot, got to get the story. And the best thing is really at lunchtime or dinner is really talking about what have we gotten and where are we going? How does this change what we're going to do this afternoon? It's a great collaborative experience to have. And so I think the technology is letting us do a lot more of that. The cameras, now you can run for hours without stopping to change a tape, which is good, and it's not good. Sometimes a break is really important for everybody, to just take a minute. You know, people forget they're on camera sometimes. Real conversations happen. But I think the biggest thing is that this we have more media, and it's all smaller, and that you're not carrying tapes around in big pockets, but now you need somebody to deal with all those little cards, which adds another, you know. Now we don't have a camera assistant, we have a data manager. So it's changed a lot the way we work, but the thing that always stays constant is getting the story. And I think that's what everybody's saying here. And really, you know, it doesn't matter what the camera is. I can use a big camera and people won't even know I'm there, and that's just the way it goes. You know, it has to be big enough to do the work, and then sometimes you got to talk people out of wanting a big, fancy, expensive camera because it's not appropriate. But it's really about getting the work done, and the work drives documentary filmmaking, I think.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's less about, we were talking, I mean, we started this conversation camera, then we went to lenses, but it was almost
Circular,
wrong way to go about it. It's I mean, for me, it's like I look at the DP first before I start looking at all that.
Right, of course.
And actually, you're a perfect example, because, you know, my last film is the Lego documentary, which isn't out yet. And Shana, you worked on that, and, you know, just sort of sat down with the producers and we said, oh, well, who's going to be right for these scenes? Because in this particular case, we didn't have one DP. We probably had like 30, you know, because we were shooting all over the world. And Shana came up as like, well, who would be the best person to sort of help tap into the intimacy and like these kids, and like not have these kids, you know, freaked out when the camera's there, and someone that could really know how to tell a story from an emotional standpoint. And that became, you know, why we worked with Shana. So that's a big part of it. So it's like story, how are we going to tell that story? Who are we going to bring on to help tell that story?
The people that helped to make that.
Right. Wow. And then, okay, then there's cameras and lenses and all the other crap.
Well, it's a great message. And yes, please.
Just to add to that, I think when you're shooting non-scripted work, you know, you invariably, in order to get something authentic, you invariably become a part of the community. And when you become a part of a community, you can't help but feel totally invested in what's going on, especially for something that's happening, it's unfolding in real time. It's totally non-scripted. You don't have an endpoint. And in that sense, it gets very, very draining. And if you don't find the structure in it, it can get very emotionally kind of, you know, you do get drained in that way. So it's about, for me, it's about finding the balance between structure and I guess the fluidity and being able to adapt and think on your feet.
Well, this is great. We're about out of time. Thank you so much for everything. One last question: how's your doc going? How's the
It's going. You
it's
know,
going?
So I'm one of the grant recipients from AbelCine. I'm totally grateful to AbelCine and to Pete Abel for the opportunity. I was able to get a C300 for a year to work on the project, and basically it's a It's called A Better Life, and I'm following an undocumented Mexican restaurant worker who was fired because of E-Verify. He didn't have a social security number. And at the same time, he dreams of becoming a filmmaker. And so now he's, Armando he's the character, it's my subject's name. He's now paying for community college. He's made his first short film. Things are looking really good for him, and there's a surprise ending in the third act that I'm really excited to reveal once it comes out. So I really can't thank Abel enough for all of the support that you guys have provided.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, guys.
Yay.
Great. Thank you so much.